Walk into the ground floor entrance of the Burj Khalifa on a Saturday afternoon in January, what should be peak tourist season when Dubai's weather is perfect and visitors from around the world flock to the city, and you'll experience something that feels fundamentally wrong. The queue areas, designed to handle thousands of people waiting to ascend to the observation decks, stand mostly empty. The serpentine barriers that used to corral crowds, snaking back and forth for hours now, channel a thin, sporadic stream of visitors who barely need the organization. The ticketing counters that once operated at full capacity with staff frantically processing transactions now have more employees than customers. Walk past the ground floor retail, and you'll see sales staff standing idle, waiting for tourists who never seem to arrive in the numbers they used to. Take the high-speed elevator to level 124 and 125, the main observation deck called At the Top, and the emptiness becomes even more striking. The viewing platforms that used to be so packed you had to elbow your way to the glass to get a photo now have vast stretches of open space. You can walk directly to any viewing window without waiting, without maneuvering around other tourists, without any sense that you're sharing this experience with hundreds of other people. The outdoor terrace on level 124, which used to require patience and strategic positioning to access during busy periods, now feels almost deserted. You can stand there for minutes without another soul approaching. The Burj Khalifa, the world's tallest building, Dubai's most iconic landmark. The structure that appears in every promotional video and tourism campaign about the city is experiencing a visitor crisis that nobody wants to acknowledge publicly. This tower, which was designed to accommodate millions of tourists annually and has been a cash cow generating hundreds of millions of dirhams in revenue, is seeing visitor numbers collapse at a pace that's alarming building management, impacting retail tenants, and raising serious questions about Dubai's broader tourism model. The numbers paint a devastating picture. In 2019, before the pandemic disrupted global travel, the Burj Khalifa observation decks welcomed approximately 1.87 million visitors. That was already down from the peak years of 2016 and 2017 when annual visitor counts exceeded 2 million. In 2022 and early 2023, as travel restrictions lifted and Dubai pushed hard to recover tourism, visitor numbers rebounded to approximately 1.5 million annually. But 2024 saw a sharp decline, with estimates suggesting fewer than 1.1 million people visited the observation decks. Early data from 2025 suggests the trend is worsening, with some months seeing visitor numbers 40% to 50% below the same months in 2023. To put that in perspective, the Burj Khalifa observation decks are operating at roughly 55% to 60% of their pre-pandemic capacity in terms of visitor volume. During what should be peak hours, 10 a.m. to 8 p.m., when lighting and views are optimal, the decks might see 800 to 1,200 visitors per day, when they were designed to handle 3,000 to 4,000 comfortably. On weekdays during non-peak season, visitor counts can drop below 500 per day. Those are catastrophically low numbers for an attraction that depends on volume to generate revenue and justify operational costs. Revenue per visitor has also declined significantly. In an attempt to maintain overall revenue despite falling visitor numbers, management increased ticket prices repeatedly, but the strategy backfired. Higher prices further deterred price-sensitive tourists while failing to generate enough additional revenue from the reduced visitor base. The result is that total revenue from observation deck tickets, retail and food and beverage operations on the upper levels has fallen an estimated 35% to 45% compared to peak years. For an asset that cost 1.5 billion to build and requires millions of dirhams annually to operate and maintain, those revenue declines are unsustainable. The visual evidence is everywhere if you know where to look. The retail stores on the ground floor of the Burj Khalifa, positioned to capture tourists before and after their observation deck visits, report foot traffic down 50% or more compared to a few years ago. Stores that used to generate AED 500,000 to 700,000 in monthly revenue are now doing AED 200,000 to 300,000. Some have closed entirely. The restaurants and cafes inside the tower that depend on tourist traffic are operating at 40% to 50% capacity during what should be their busiest periods. Atmosphere, the high-end restaurant on level 122, which used to require reservations weeks in advance, now has same-day availability most days. The gift shops selling Burj Khalifa merchandise, Miniature replicas, photo books, postcards, keychains report that sales have fallen off a cliff. Tourists who do visit are less likely to buy souvenirs, either because they're more budget conscious or because the visit itself doesn't generate the excitement and desire to commemorate it with a purchase. Staff at these shops describe long stretches with no customers at all, standing around waiting for anyone to browse. The impact extends beyond the building itself. The plaza around the Burj Khalifa, Burj Park, and the surrounding retail and dining establishments that were built to capture tourist overflow from the tower are all struggling. Restaurants with outdoor seating facing the tower, which used to be premium locations commanding higher menu prices, now sit half empty. The street performers and photographers who used to work the plaza area making money from tourists have largely disappeared because there aren't enough visitors to make it worthwhile. So what happened? How did the world's most iconic skyscraper, a structure that was supposed to be an eternal tourist magnet, suddenly find itself struggling to attract visitors? The answer is a combination of pricing strategies that backfired, changing tourist preferences and behaviors, competition from newer attractions in Dubai and globally, broader issues with Dubai's tourism model, and a fundamental shift in what modern travelers want from their vacation experiences. Let's start with the most immediate and obvious problem. Ticket prices have increased to levels that make visiting the Burj Khalifa observation deck a luxury expense that many tourists can no longer justify. In 2015, a standard ticket to the at-the-top observation deck on level 124 and 125 cost approximately AED 125 during non-peak hours. By 2025, that same ticket costs AED 189 for non-prime time slots. For prime time visits, which cover most of the hours when tourists actually want to visit, prices have jumped to AED 244. That's a 95% increase in a decade. The premium tickets are even more expensive. At the top skivai, which includes access to level 148, the highest observation deck, now costs AED 399 for non-prime time and AED 554 for prime time slots. That's $150 for a single admission to stand on a platform for 30 to 45 minutes. For a family of 4, visiting the highest level during prime time costs AED 2,216, or roughly $600. When you add transportation to and from the tower, perhaps a meal, and other incidental costs, a family can easily spend $800 to $1,000 for a few hours at the Burj Khalifa. Most tourists, especially families and budget-conscious travelers, simply can't justify that expense. When you're on vacation and managing a daily budget, spending $600 on observation deck tickets means cutting something else, another attraction, a nice dinner, shopping, or reducing the length of your stay. Many tourists are making the rational decision that the Burj Khalifa, at current prices, isn't worth the sacrifice. They'd rather spend that money on experiences that offer more value, more time, or more unique elements that can't be replicated elsewhere. The pricing strategy was based on a flawed assumption that the Burj Khalifa was so iconic and unique that tourists would pay almost any price to visit. That might have been true when the tower was new and there were no comparable alternatives, but a decade later, the novelty has worn off, and the global landscape of observation decks and tall buildings has changed dramatically. Tourists now have options, and when those options are cheaper and offer comparable or even better experiences, the Burj Khalifa loses its monopoly pricing power. Compare the Burj Khalifa's prices to other major observation deck attractions globally, and the premium Dubai is trying to charge becomes obvious. The Empire State Building in New York, one of the world's most famous observation decks, charges approximately $44 for standard admission. The Tokyo Skytree, one of the tallest towers in the world, charges roughly $25 for access to its main observation deck. The Shard in London costs around $32, approximately $40. Even newer, state-of-the-art observation decks like the Edge in New York or the One World Observatory charge $40 to $45 for general admission. The Burj Khalifa is charging 2 to 3 times what comparable attractions in major global cities charge, and it's doing so in a market where the average tourist has less disposable income than visitors to New York, London, or Tokyo. The price sensitivity is particularly acute for the largest tourism segments visiting Dubai: Indian tourists, GCC nationals, and European budget travelers. Indian families, which make up a massive portion of Dubai's tourism, are extremely price conscious. Spending AED 1,000 to 1,500 for a family to visit the observation deck represents a significant portion of their total vacation budget. Many are choosing to skip it entirely, or settling for viewing the building from the outside and taking photos from ground level, which costs nothing. GCC nationals who used to visit Dubai regularly for weekend trips have been to the Burj Khalifa multiple times already and aren't interested in paying premium prices for repeat visits. European budget travelers, particularly those using low-cost carriers and staying in affordable accommodation, find the ticket prices incompatible with their overall budget travel philosophy. The second major issue is that modern tourists, especially younger travelers, are increasingly uninterested in traditional observation deck experiences. The behavior and preferences of millennials and Gen Z travelers, who now dominate global tourism, are fundamentally different from previous generations, and the Burj Khalifa hasn't adapted to those changes. Today's travelers want experiences that are interactive, Instagram-worthy, unique, and offer more than just passive viewing. They want to do something, not just see something. An observation deck, where you ride an elevator, look out windows, take some photos and leave, doesn't meet that criteria for many young travelers. It's a static, one-dimensional experience that feels outdated in an era where travelers seek immersion, engagement, and story-worthy moments. The rise of social media has created a paradox for the Burj Khalifa. On one hand, the tower itself is one of the most photographed buildings in the world, appearing in millions of Instagram posts and TikTok videos. But here's the problem. Most of those photos are taken from the ground, from Dubai Mall, from the fountain area, or from other vantage points around the city. The tower looks more impressive from outside than the view from inside looks. When you're on the observation deck, your photos show a cityscape that, while vast, doesn't have the same iconic visual punch as a shot of the Burj Khalifa itself towering over the skyline. Influencers and content creators who drive much of modern tourism through their content aren't finding the observation deck experience compelling enough to feature prominently. It's been done to death. There are thousands of videos and photo series of the view from the Burj Khalifa already online. Unless a creator has a unique angle or can add significant value, there's no reason to create yet another "look at the view from the top" post. As a result, the observation deck generates less organic social media promotion than it used to, which reduces its appeal to the next wave of tourists who rely on social media to decide what attractions are worth visiting. The experience itself hasn't evolved meaningfully since the tower opened. Yes, there have been minor updates, some new displays, better lighting, renovated retail spaces, but the core offering is identical to what it was 14 years ago. You ride an elevator, you look at a view, you leave. There's no augmented reality experience that enhances what you're seeing. There's no interactive element where you learn about the city's history or the tower's construction in an engaging way. There's no unique dining or entertainment element that makes the visit about more than just the view. It's the same observation deck experience that's been offered since the 1930s, just higher up. Compare this to newer attractions in Dubai, and you'll see why the Burj Khalifa is losing relevance. The Museum of the Future offers an immersive, interactive experience where every element is designed to engage visitors and encourage exploration. Aya Universe creates Instagram-worthy installations in every room specifically designed for social media sharing. AI in Dubai, when it was operating, offered a 38-minute experience inside moving capsules with food and beverage options. These attractions understand modern tourism better than the Burj Khalifa does, and they're capturing visitor attention and spending. Even within the category of observation decks, the Burj Khalifa is being outcompeted by newer facilities that offer more than just height. The View at the Palm, which opened in 2021, offers a 360-degree observation deck with augmented reality features, outdoor terraces, and a glass floor section, all at a lower price point than the Burj Khalifa. Sky Views Dubai in downtown features a glass slide connecting two towers and an edge walk experience, offering thrill seekers something they can't get from a standard observation deck. These attractions are taking market share from the Burj Khalifa because they've recognized that height alone isn't enough anymore. The competition isn't just local. Globally, cities have invested in observation deck experiences that make the Burj Khalifa feel dated. The Edge in New York has a glass floor, an outdoor sky deck, and angled glass walls that let you lean out over the city. The Shanghai Tower's observation deck incorporates virtual reality and interactive displays. The CN Tower in Toronto offers an edge-walk experience where you can walk around the outside of the tower while harnessed. These attractions have evolved beyond passive viewing, and tourists comparing options increasingly find the Burj Khalifa lacking. The broader context of Dubai's tourism struggles is also hitting the Burj Khalifa hard. As we've discussed in previous videos, Dubai is experiencing a tourism slowdown across the board. Hotel occupancy is down, retail foot traffic is weak. Attractions are seeing reduced visitor numbers and overall tourist spending has declined. The Burj Khalifa isn't immune to these trends. It's actually more vulnerable because it's a discretionary, premium-priced attraction that tourists can easily skip when they're being more selective about spending. The tourist demographic visiting Dubai has also shifted in ways that don't favor the Burj Khalifa. The city is attracting more budget-conscious travelers and fewer high-spending luxury tourists. Budget travelers are exactly the segment most likely to look at the Burj Khalifa ticket prices and decide it's not worth it. They'll take photos from the ground, enjoy the free fountain show, and allocate their money to experiences that offer better perceived value. The length of stay for Dubai tourists has also shortened. Visitors used to stay 5 to 7 days on average, which gave them time to hit all the major attractions. Now, average stays are closer to 3 to 4 days, and tourists are cramming more into less time. The Burj Khalifa requires a half-day commitment when you factor in travel time, queuing even in low traffic periods, the visit itself, and the return journey. For tourists on tight schedules, that time investment is increasingly hard to justify, especially when there are newer, more buzzworthy attractions competing for attention. The reduction in Chinese tourism has been particularly damaging for the Burj Khalifa. Chinese tourists were among the most reliable visitors to the observation deck, often purchasing premium tickets and visiting in large tour groups. The collapse in Chinese outbound tourism and the shift in Chinese traveler preferences away from traditional sightseeing toward shopping and unique experiences has removed a core customer segment that the Burj Khalifa depended on. The operational challenges and cost structure of running the Burj Khalifa's observation deck business are also coming into sharp focus as revenue declines. The building is expensive to operate, and the observation deck specifically requires significant staffing, energy for elevators and climate control, maintenance, security, insurance, and marketing. When visitor numbers were high, those costs were easily covered with substantial profit margins. As visitor numbers fall, the operation is moving toward break-even or potentially into loss-making territory. Staffing levels have been reduced multiple times, but there's a limit to how much you can cut without degrading the experience. The observation deck still needs security personnel, elevator operators, ticketing staff, customer service representatives, cleaning crews, and maintenance workers. Even with reduced visitor volumes, you can't cut staff proportionally because you still need to maintain service standards and operate safely. The result is that per-visitor costs have increased dramatically as fixed costs are spread across fewer tickets sold. Energy costs are particularly brutal. Running high-speed elevators that climb 124 floors or more requires enormous amounts of electricity. Climate controlling the observation deck spaces, which have huge amounts of glass creating thermal load, is expensive. Lighting the building's exterior, which has become iconic and is essential for maintaining the building's visual presence in the city, costs millions annually. These expenses don't decrease just because fewer tourists are visiting. The building has to be operated at full capacity from an infrastructure standpoint, even when it's only 50% or 60% full from a visitor standpoint. Marketing costs have increased as Burj Khalifa management tries to counteract declining visitor numbers through promotion. Digital advertising, social media campaigns, partnerships with hotels and tour operators, discounts and promotions, all of these cost money, but they're generating diminishing returns. No amount of marketing can overcome fundamental issues with pricing, experience quality, and changing tourist preferences. The building is spending more on marketing and getting less results. Another sign of a business model under severe stress. The revenue streams beyond ticket sales are also suffering. The retail stores inside the tower pay rent based on foot traffic expectations that are no longer being met. Some are negotiating reduced rents or threatening to leave entirely. The food and beverage operations, which generate high margins when they're busy, are operating well below capacity and struggling to maintain profitability. The photography services that used to generate substantial revenue by selling professional photos to tourists have seen demand collapse as smartphone cameras have improved and tourists prefer taking their own shots. The long-term implications for the Burj Khalifa and for Dubai more broadly are significant and troubling. The tower was supposed to be an eternal attraction, the one thing that would always draw tourists to Dubai regardless of what else was happening in the city. That assumption is being proven wrong, and it's forcing a reckoning about what happens when your most iconic landmark loses its pull. For Emaar, the developer that built and operates the Burj Khalifa, this is a financial problem. The observation deck business was supposed to generate steady, predictable cash flow for decades. That cash flow is now uncertain, and the capital that was invested in building the tower and its tourism infrastructure isn't generating the returns that were projected. Emaar's overall business is facing challenges across multiple segments, and the Burj Khalifa weakness adds to those pressures. For Dubai's tourism sector, the Burj Khalifa's struggles are a warning sign. If the city's most famous attraction can't maintain visitor numbers, what does that say about the health of the broader tourism market? It suggests that Dubai's appeal is weakening, that tourists are finding better value or more interesting experiences elsewhere, and that the city's reliance on spectacle and superlatives, the tallest, the biggest, the most expensive, isn't resonating with modern travelers the way it used to. There's also a risk of a negative feedback loop. As word spreads that the Burj Khalifa is expensive and not worth the price, fewer people visit, which reduces the social proof and FOMO that drive tourism. When attractions are busy and popular, people want to visit because they don't want to miss out. When they're empty, people wonder if there's a reason everyone else is skipping it, and they decide to skip it too. The Burj Khalifa risks entering this downward spiral where declining popularity begets further decline. The building's reputation and brand are also at risk. For years, the Burj Khalifa has been synonymous with Dubai and with luxury, achievement, and spectacle. But empty observation decks, desperate price promotions, and the increasing irrelevance of the tower as a tourist destination all chip away at that brand. If the Burj Khalifa becomes seen as a tourist trap, an overpriced, underwhelming experience that savvy travelers skip, the damage to Dubai's overall image is substantial. The options for addressing this crisis are limited, and none of them are easy. The most obvious solution, cutting ticket prices, has major downsides. Lower prices would likely increase visitor volume, but the elasticity isn't certain. Would a 30% price cut generate a 50% increase in visitors? Maybe, maybe not. And lower prices mean lower per visitor revenue, which might not offset the operational costs of serving more people. There's also a perception risk. If the Burj Khalifa starts heavily discounting, it signals weakness and diminishes the premium positioning the tower has tried to maintain. Reinvesting in the experience to add new elements, interactive displays, augmented reality, unique dining, or entertainment options would require significant capital expenditure with no guarantee of success. Emaar is facing financial pressures across its business and may not have the appetite to pour tens of millions into upgrading an attraction that's already struggling. Shifting the target market toward local residents and regional tourists rather than international visitors is another option. Offer resident pricing, create annual passes, host events and experiences that appeal to people living in Dubai and the GCC. This could maintain some level of activity and revenue, but it fundamentally changes what the Burj Khalifa is. It would no longer be an international tourism icon, but rather a local attraction, which diminishes its significance and probably doesn't generate the revenue levels needed to justify the asset. Some within the industry have suggested that the observation decks could be converted to other uses entirely: luxury private clubs, event spaces, corporate hospitality suites, unique dining concepts. But all of these require investment and would reduce or eliminate public access to the upper levels, which seems antithetical to the tower's purpose and would generate negative publicity. The most likely scenario is a slow, managed decline where the Burj Khalifa continues operating its observation decks at reduced capacity, cuts costs where possible, uses pricing promotions to maintain minimum visitor volumes, and hopes that broader improvements in Dubai's tourism or global economic conditions eventually restore demand. This isn't a collapse, but it's not success either. It's survival mode. What's most striking about the Burj Khalifa's visitor crisis is how quickly it developed and how few tools management has to address it. Just 3 or 4 years ago, the tower was still drawing strong crowds and generating solid revenue. The decline has been steep and sudden, driven by forces, pricing miscalculations, changing tourist behavior, increased competition, broader tourism weakness that are difficult or impossible to reverse quickly. For an asset that was supposed to be timeless and immune to market changes, This vulnerability is shocking. Walk through the observation decks of the Burj Khalifa today, and you'll feel the emptiness in a way that's almost eerie. The spaces were designed for crowds, for energy, for the excitement of hundreds of people sharing an extraordinary experience. When those crowds disappear, what's left is just glass, concrete, and air. A magnificent view, certainly, but one that somehow feels hollow when you're experiencing it alone or with just a handful of other visitors scattered across vast spaces. That emptiness is more than just a business problem for the building's operators. It's a metaphor for Dubai's broader challenges. The city built itself around spectacle, around being the biggest, the tallest, the most extraordinary. But spectacle alone doesn't sustain a tourism industry or an economy. Eventually, you need substance, value, experiences that resonate with how people actually want to travel and spend their time and money. The Burj Khalifa's empty observation decks are a signal that the old formula isn't working anymore, and Dubai hasn't yet figured out what comes next. If you visited the Burj Khalifa recently, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't been in a few years, the change would shock you. The icon is still standing, still the tallest building in the world, still visually stunning. But the human element, the crowds, the energy, the sense that you're part of something special, that's fading, and nobody seems to know how to bring it back. What do you think? Is the Burj Khalifa still worth visiting at current prices? Have you noticed it feeling emptier? Let me know in the comments, and subscribe for more reality checks on what's really happening in Dubai's tourism industry.